In this lesson, I'm going to resolve the detail for the cucumbers or pickles and the top sauce and top cheese. So I'm going to hide everything except those things for now. Okay, I'm gonna leave these on the screen for now. And I want to talk about something that I may have missed. I keep calling these two pickles, but they appear to be cucumbers, which pickles are just cucumbers preserved in vinegar, but it has a different visual feel when it's been soaked in vinegar. These appear to be the two types of cucumbers that I see at my grocery store. This is the one with ridges, which is called I think it's called the English cucumber, and then this one is the slicer cucumber. Now, thankfully, when I was assembling the reference of cucumbers or pickles, I have both types. This is your pickle, which is a cucumber soaked in vinegar, and this one is just a regular sliced cucumber, and so is this one. So I will be using all of this to help me get an end result. When you soak it in vinegar, it becomes more translucent at the core, so you can see almost right through it, which is not the case with the real cucumber. This will matter a lot because it's going to change the way I'm going to shade it. But as far as the outer look of it, or the work that has to be done in ZBrush, the difference won't matter as much. With the real cucumber, you can see you can't really look right through it, right? But there is some degree of translucency though, that allows you to see the seeds that are embedded right underneath the surface. So I'll be trying to simulate the same effect. All right, I'm going to isolate it and start polishing the grooves with my build-up brush. So I'm going to push in just to get started, get that nice gradation. I'm not going to go too far into the center because I know the center is going to have a gutty detail. It still has the grooves because whatever was used to slice it also impacts the center. I'm just gonna start with I think in this instance, I'm gonna make sure I don't think there are this many grooves. I think towards the outskirts, it's a lot more whole. There's less grooves. So it's a bigger slice at the edges. Looks like I completely forgot to do the bottom. To make sure I'm connecting the right. Parts. I'm going to change this alpha for the build up. I usually like to use this round one. It's a more organic feel. think it's good. I'm going to take the move tool and just start hinting at some of these grooves. So I can help myself with the shape that I'm shooting for. It's more rounded. Do the same for here. I should have done this on a lower subdivision level, but I'm just going to make the lowest recessed part by taking the Damien standard and using it to create the lowest recessed part. I'm going to take the trim dynamic brush and start shaving to create a gradation. Looking for a nice slope that goes up to a peak. And I'll polish this more when I convert it to subdivision level. It's a lot easier to push the recessed and peak look at lower subdivision level, but this is just like a rough block out. All right, now I'm going to start hacking away at this gutty center. Well, what's going to be this gutty center? I'm going to start digging in. This is where the seeds are going to be, and it's not perfectly polished. It still respects the grooves though, so I just want to hint at it at this stage. I'm using Alt to shave away, just to create some not so groovy detail. bit too much here. I want to make sure I take it to subdivision levels, to the final subdivision level before I start really putting in the detail that I want to see here. I'll start hinting at some of the guttiness. Let's see what I have so far. All right, I just confused myself a little because I'm looking back and forth at the supplementary reference and my main reference. I seem to have forgotten that this is not sliced to have the grooves as aggressively as my supplementary references. So I'm not going to overemphasize these grooves any longer. This just looks like a sliced English pickle. It does have some uneven edges on the screen right side. So I'm going to be very careful about how I overemphasize these grooves. I'm going to start toning them down, right? Because the main reference doesn't have that. It just looks like an English pickle that was sliced right through. So I'm going to go here and tone down these grooves, right? It's just a mistake that could be very easily repaired. I guess I wanted to do one with the grooves so bad, but I am trying to match my reference, so I'm going to be careful about just proceeding like that. That also means that these more rounded edges, I'm going to have to tone them down, because that's not what we have. I got a little too far ahead of myself. Just build up to just get this less groovy result to the gutty center. Yeah, it would have been really fun to do a groovy one, but I want to just stay as close to my reference, what I'm seeing in my reference, so there's not too much of a mismatch. The goal was to observe and deconstruct the reference, not and do some degree of invention, but stay true to what I'm seeing. Alright, so I want to take a look at it. I do have the grooves on the side, and I have to keep de-emphasizing this over-aggressive groove system. Okay, so I think I have a final piece that I want to move along with. So before I start polishing it, I'm going to convert this into my final subdivision level so I can take the detail to completion. So I'm going to duplicate this, delete this original piece. I'm going to hide these pieces. Actually, I'm going to just move these out of the group, hide the group. I don't have to solo anymore. And going to go to Z remesher and Z remesh at a very low subdivision level, say 1000, maybe less. Okay, this is a good final piece. So I'm going to project the detail. Okay, so I'll divide and project, divide again, project, get some of that gritty detail. One more time. I'll just do one more, divide, project. I'll take all the detail and worry about cleaning it up myself. Alright, so I'm going to start cleaning up these edges. Use the Damien standard to define this edge a lot better. I'm going to go all the way around, make sure I get and we need trim dynamic too. Get the nice pristine edge. Start getting it on this subdivision level. Turn on my ingredients to make sure I'm focusing on the right part of it. Okay, I'm going to start polishing this information here. I don't want noise detail right now. I want a good form. I'm going to start taking these shapes and hinting at them by putting in some better form. Unfortunately, the real thing is shrouded in so much darkness, so I'm just gonna have to do what I think looks good for now. This is sort of like what I would classify as secondary detail. These little striations that come from the original, I'll leave as is. This here feels a bit too mechanical, so it's really like a man-made groove. So I want to make sure I break them up so that I'm not looking at something that it doesn't feel organic enough, and that's what you're going to see me do as I go around here. And the back especially needs it because it feels very straight. Feels good. See where it's at. There's a very organic feel to it. All right, now I'm going to go to this top part and also start to finalize this secondary form. Make sure it all blends together. The seeds are going to be right underneath here. This brush stroke feel and end up with something that feels more gutty. Sure it blends into the outskirts a lot better. I'll do the same for the other side. Change the material. Take the Damien standard and start hinting at some of these shapes that reveal themselves during this gutting phase and emphasize them. Careful to allocate my efforts to the top, which is going to be seen a lot more. terminates correctly and that I lose these striations. They're not. Thing. Just building a nice base that's going to receive a lot of tertiary detail. A lot of basic material. Move any remnants of that, of the grooves, blending it well, the outskirts. It's still there, but it'll eventually all go away. It's feeling good. I won't over detail the sides, every single side, because I do want some a little bit of breakup of detail contrast. Not do too much. I'm going to work on adding some striation detail to certain parts of the side. Before I do that, I'm going to solo it, subdivide it a few times to get to a good resolution, right? So about 7 should be fine. And then I'm going to store a morph target because this striation detail I'm about to add, I want to be able to get rid of a lot of it that I don't want. So I'm going to store a morph target, and I'm going to take the standard brush, go into my file system, and load in a wrinkle alpha that comes with ZBrush. Any one of them would work. This one works really well most of the time. So I'm going to, but I used it a lot, so I want to try a different one this time. I'll use this one. And with a morph target stored, I'm going to actually set it to drag rect. Make sure it's subtracting. Unsolo to make sure I'm putting it in a good place. And get some on the back too. I'm actually just going to try to cover the whole thing and get rid of it the way I see fit. Yeah, I'll cover the whole thing. Alright, I'm gonna grab I'm gonna unsolo, and grab the morph brush. And reduce its intensity and start getting rid of it in certain areas, making it less intense in other areas. So it's really light. Add a bit of striation detail. And then I want to grab my Damien standard and look for the front again. This is the front. And I'm going to start doing some work to blend it a little bit better. So I don't have just striations coming down. Some good blending. It's a little too strong. I'm trying to find a good happy medium. I don't want this get some interesting shapes that blend into each other a lot better. Try to prevent myself from doing the same type of information. Adding different bits of information is good. Most of this part isn't going to be seen, so I really should make sure that my attention is focused on polishing this front part. But when the other side comes off, it does need to look good. I'm gonna grab the morph brush and take away a lot more of it. Especially at the top there, I don't need any at the top. So wherever it bled to the top, I'm gonna get rid of that. And the bottom too. Do some detail contrast. Have none in some areas, intense ones in certain areas, and medium range intensity in other areas. It's a nice breakup of the detail. Looks good. I like it. This all feels fairly even, so I'll just start digging in. First, turn off dynamic. So I can go really small. I'm not going to do too much of this fine information on the back. I'm about to rely on a few alphas, and I just want to get some interesting breakup of information. And blending of these striations. This is going to form the underlying form for the noise pass I'm about to put on. Clean this up a bit so I can lose any semblance of the original striations and replace it with new form. I'm going to dig in with the clay buildup and just create some more abstract-like form. It kind of help add some cool abstraction too, so it's not all bad that I still have some of the form from the ridges. Just have to make sure it's not too much. Polish this a bit so it's not an isolated form. Okay. Just tumbling to make sure I don't have any mechanical looking shapes. Okay, feels fairly organic. Already started to see some bits of personality here, so it's good. Okay, what I'm going to do next is do my first layer of noise. I just need to do something that I can sculpt on top of, right? So I just need some noise data. And to get it, I'm going to first mask the side. Actually, before I proceed, I'm now going to delete my morph target because I'm going to create a new one. So I'm going to go delete morph target. Continue masking this side. It doesn't have to be a perfect mask. Usually when these things get damaged, they will get both striations or wrinkle data and noise data. The rest of it is relatively smooth. With the surface noise, frame it. A little too strong. Actually, first I'm going to create a layer. just so I can have a little bit more control. Noise. And start playing with the scale. Clear it with my graph a bit. Okay, before I deal with this, let me start morph target. Go back to the surface noise, and I think I should be going with a smaller scale. There we go. We'll go apply to mesh. It's actually not as invasive as I thought. I think I should be on a higher subdivision level. So I'll just take this noise. It's good data. Thought it was going to be really invasive and I could erase certain parts. All right, I'm gonna go to layers, close it, and bake all. Might as well add the noise for the top now. So I'm going to do the same thing. Still have my morph target. Let me make sure of that. Okay. Go to layers, add a layer, add some surface noise. I'm going to go with something a little stronger. Like that. Okay. Go to layers, bake all, apply to mesh. Okay. I'm going to remove some of it with the morph brush because it's a lot. So go to morph. Switch this over. Break it up a little so it don't have just like constant similar noise on the whole thing. I'm going to go through and try to outline the lip just a little bit because there is a visible difference. It's not separation at that lip. And I want to just make sure I'm at least hinting at it. I'm not making a perfect straight line, so just make sure there's something indicating a separation. To guide me at the shading phase. I'm gonna get the morph brush and do some more toning down of this noise. Certain noise. take some a bit away from these, like more not so, the areas where there's not so much wrinkle data, so we get more smoother result there, and make for a nice breakup. Some more morphing just to change the breakup of the noise. I'm actually going to push some of these recessed areas to separate some areas that are more intense, because when you look at it, it's all even, and that's even detail, and it's not always good. It's not good at all to have that. We want to make sure some areas are more recessed than others, and I'll do it at the places where there's already a more intense effect, like here, and get something other than just striations. Get some more abstract digs. It looks very busy. Make this more of an organic dig. I'm going to go to a higher subdivision level and put the type of noise I want in on the side. So I'm going to go divide. I have 26 million. Solo it. And then I'm going to go to these places where there's a lot of information. Like these places where there's a deep insets. Here, and mask them out in preparation for noise. Here too. It's a good spot. I see that a lot when I look at these things close up. It's like the places that are more damaged have this like noise. It's like it's really noisy. Do that. Go to a lower subdivision level and do the blur. So a blur mask. Looks like I need to be a lot lower. Around there. And blur mask. Okay. That should be good. And go back to the high subdivision level. Invert the mask. Go to noise, edit. This is going to be really small detail. So edit. I don't like the graph. Inverse should work That's a lot better. Let me add a layer for the surface noise, apply to mesh. Yes, that's kind of what I was looking for. Adjust those areas. I still have the morph, and so I can take them out if I want to. But it looks, I'll accept it. Alright, now I'm going to add some bump detail. Call this noise at damage. I'm going to take my standard brush, go to color spray, and pick out a 40, and do this varied spray of bumps, which should be more intense. Really small, yeah, like that. That might be too much. Actually, I may have it wrong. The layers are slowing things down, so I'm just gonna bake all this information in. Bake all. And let me start a morph target so I can control these bumps. First, I'll delete the morph target I have, store a new one. Yeah, that's about the size I want. I'll just spray it very freely and come back and control. It's just too much, so control is definitely needed. Okay, now I'll grab my morph target brush and start getting rid of most of them. They're not so prominent everywhere, because that's not usually how they appear. And they're also not the same size, so I'm going to do one more pass of a larger version. Okay, so I'll take the brush, grab a larger brush size, and yeah, and do a larger one. Just to break it up because they look all the same. I'm gonna grab my morph brush again. Be very strategic and remove ones that are just not looking as good. Creeping into areas they shouldn't be in. Okay, I'm going to inspect it for a while and see how to proceed. Before I start with the seeds at the top, I want to make sure this side is good. Right now it's looking very busy. The detail does have to be pushed for it to barely show on the final model. So I might be coming in here and adding some little bit more information. Let me tone down these. Might have gotten a little bit too happy with the bumps on the back side here. I don't want them to overwhelm too much. And there's some bare areas here which I should really work on blending. Either with noise or secondary form, but I'll see what it feels like. Try a few materials. All right, I wanted to take a look at it with the other elements around it that are finished, and it looks like it fits in well. Even though it feels busy, you'll see that when I texture it, it'll work really well. There's a lot of additional detail that also has to go in the side. It has a really grunge-like noisy coloring on the sides, and there's a lot of other interesting coloring that's going to happen. But right now, I'm going to move on to the seeds. So I'm going to hide the top bun and the top patties. And then I'm going to, a lot of this middle part might have to be changed, which is very easy to do on the lower subdivision level to support the design of the seeds. So it's a very unique design. I'm going to start by appending a sphere. Zoom out and scale it down. So it produces this like triangular shape with 3 pathways to the outskirts. So, but first let me create a seed. So let me scale this down and scale this in. So it looks a little something like that with this side like this extended like that. And they are different. I'm about to randomize the shape, but not now. I'm going to duplicate this to create its tail. So I'm going to come over here. The tail is a lot skinnier, flatter, something like that. Right. And as far as my knowledge, it kind of doesn't really impact the, you can see a visible separation between the seed and the tail. Right. I'm going to shape it in a little bit and maybe resurface it at the lower subdivision level. Yeah. So I can get something make it a little bit more organic, but I'll be altering it a lot just to make it different. And the seed really isn't this thick, so I'm going to scale it down again. So about that. It does have a really bulby feel, so I'm going to try to keep the spherical properties intact. And I'm also going to resurface this at the lower subdivision level, the lowest, okay. And I'll subdivide them after I'm done with them. These seeds, I won't apply any excessive detail on them. They're going to count on their texturing and material effects. They're also going to be embedded inside this mesh. So this whole central region is going to have a transmission map that allows this central region to be a lot more translucent, and these seeds should be able to show through from underneath. Merge them together. So I'm going to merge down, and then I'm going to try to start positioning this thing in the design that it's supposed to be in. I'm going to turn on transparency so I can see inside as I position it. But first I'll try to position it up top first. Okay, so it produces a triangular shape in 3 quadrants. All right, let me get that first. So if I was to duplicate this, it would something like this. And I'll duplicate from here. Scale down too much. Okay, so something like that. And there's 3 quadrants of them. I'm going to group these 3 into a new folder, so I can duplicate the entire folder to create the rest. I'm going to go transpose set and move these to a more central region. Move this to the center and go duplicate. Go always, and then I'll transpose set and move the next 3 here, and then I'll duplicate the folder again and go transpose set and move the next quadrant here. Okay, so it's 3 quadrants of seeds, and I'm going to keep them high for now so I can see them and design them better. Okay, yeah, so it's something like this, and it produces this triangular pathway. So I'm going to try to emphasize that triangular pathway by editing these. So it has like, and because this is a little too, it feels mechanical, feels really contrived, I'm going to add an additional one in, well, two additional ones in 2 quadrants. So I'll duplicate this, move it to the side, let's really scale it down just to, so we don't have this even, like this really even look. That one I'll keep with 3, and I'll do it again over here where I duplicate, cancel. I don't want to duplicate the group, I want to duplicate the seed and scale it down. So we have our seed like this. All right. So those are the seeds. And now that they are working, I'm going to now offset them because they're going to go inside, and I'm going to create about 2 tiers of them so that it can also show from the back. But before I do that, I want to take these individual seeds and offset them because they all cannot be on the same plane. So I'll offset them a little. Everybody cannot be on the same plane in the showcased axis. So I'm going to come here, move that a little lower, and move that a little higher. Okay. All right, now I'm going to take these groups and embed them into the cucumber. So I'm going to go lower, make sure it's in here. I'll go here, transpose set, put that one in the cucumber. I'll go here, transpose set, and this one also goes in. And in order to see them, I can do that. So now they're in there. And at this point, I feel like I can merge all of them into the same folder and edit them separately. So I'm going to go merge up, so I can move them as a collective. All right, so I'm going to go transpose set and move them together. All right, now I want to create another layer of them, but I don't want them to be stacked the same. So I'm going to go duplicate to duplicate the group. Then I'm going to go transpose set and move the second group down. And what I will do now, just so they're not stacked. It's not the same shape stacked on top of the others. I'm going to rotate it about 180 degrees and make sure it's in there correctly and move it down. So these will be the seeds that will show on the other side. I'm going to turn this off. Yeah, so the seeds are in there and they will be more visible when it's time to shade. I did, however, want some of these seeds, like a handful of them, to show on the surface just a little bit. So I'm going to strategically pick about 3 of them to come to the surface for the top. Let me make sure that this is in fact the top. Yeah, so here's the top. And I'm going to strategically pick maybe that one, duplicate it, and move it up. Okay. Yeah, so it shows on the surface a little. Turn off transparency, make sure it's showing, and then also probably offset it just a little. And I'll pick another one in this quadrant, maybe 2. Pick that one, duplicate it, and move it to the surface a little. And then the last one will come from the 3rd quadrant. Duplicate and move it to the surface. Okay, so that should be 3 on the surface, closer to the surface. I'll make sure that this one is not the same size. Neither of them is the same size. I'm going to grab this piece, go to a lower subdivision level, and move it down a bit. Now another thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to merge all of them so I can apply a very slight noise to them, so that they are not all the same shape. So I'm going to hide this. So that's all of them. And all I'm going to do is just, I'm going to merge up to combine all of them. And I'm going to go merge folder. That should give me a copy of all of them. And I'm going to divide it twice. Otherwise the noise will not have that much of an impact. And then I'm going to go layers, add a layer, and then go to surface noise, add noise. And this is just to break them. It should be really large scale noise. Let me see what it looks like. Okay. That's not enough. So I'm going to go with larger scale noise. Okay. That's too much. So I'm going to go a lot lower. Okay. Apply to mesh. That's still a little aggressive. I'm going to come down to about a 3. Okay. I'll take that. That's enough noise to make everybody feel different. Yeah, that should work. And for the ones that are just a little too destroyed, I'm going to make sure I fatten them up. This geometry is completely destroyed. Okay, so if I show the pickle again and I go transparency, that's them. And they all have like randomized shapes. And then on the top, I have a few showing. Now it's going to be a little bit more difficult to edit them. First, I'm going to go auto group. I'm going to make sure every single one of them is let me group visible. So that they all have their polygroups match their tails. Group visible. Alright, so all of them have been grouped with their tail. So it allows me to select each of them and make modifications if I need to. And it's going to look a little silly until I start shading in the transparency and we can see everything that's behind there. But this gives us the best visual of what it's going to feel like. And if I have to, I'll move some of the seeds closer to the surface. I have to very strategically paint a darker, like this pathway, lighter pathway, and then each seed is surrounded by this darker hue. Well, not each, but some of them. So it's going to be a very interesting painting process. But that wraps up the work on this pickle workroom. Sorry. Speed workroom. And now that this is done, I can group this screen left English cucumber. I have to stop calling it a pickle because I resolved that it's not one. So let me make sure I rename it to English cucumber and English cucumber seeds. Alright, so that's it. I might have to adjust this bread a bit. But if we were to look at it from this angle with all that translucency, we should be able to see the seeds in there. All right, so I'm going to move on to this pickle. I'll come back to this when it's time to do the sauce. I have to make sure the sauce is connected to this pickle correctly. It has to swoop down and there have to be traces of sauce on this pickle. And there also has to be a wetness that indicates that the sauce is making this part wet, but that's designated to the painting of the roughness map later. I was considering using a transitionary mesh, but I think that's too much. I think it's going to be fine if the roughness is just painted to showcase that the sauce is wetting it, but some modifications have to be made so that they connect correctly. All right, I'm going to prepare this to be taken to finish. So I'm going to get it and its sauce out. This is one of the things where sauce is going to be merged with the ingredient. So I'm going to take them. Okay, that's that. And that's the cucumber. So I'm going to hide everything so I can focus on this. First thing I'm going to do is sharpen these edges, this separation just a little bit with the trim dynamic. So I'm going to go in and shave away to get a much more sharper transition. This one is going to have a much more flatter surface, and it's really dug inside the burger. I'm not too worried about it. So I'm going to keep the surface a lot flatter. I don't want to over detail this. So the first thing I'm going to do is start giving it some information on the side. It's not as lumpy as the English type, but there are some irregularities that travel vertically on it. They're not too excessive, but I'm going to just make sure I get some irregularities traveling vertically and do some light buildup. It's more of a tubular massing. Add these irregularities to the surface. Now to add some more interesting detail, I'm going to get the drag rect brush, find an abstract alpha, one of my favorite ones. It's a set of them. Actually, I could use this Katie Rock. That also works pretty well. Actually, I made a mistake. It's supposed to be in the alpha, so I'm going to hold down Control and load it into the alpha and use it as a mask. Drag rect, yeah, like that. And just want to add some irregularities with noise. In select areas, it'll feel really bumpy. Okay, like that. I'm gonna invert it. And then go to my surface noise. I just want some medium range detail. So I'll go noise, edit, frame. Make sure I don't overdo it. to mesh, see what it looks like. No, that's too small scale. I want something really large. Let's see what that does. That's too much. Let me apply to mesh again. I guess it will do. All I'm looking for is something that adds some abstraction that I can begin using to flesh out some primary detail. So very light primary detail at that. So I don't want just too much. So let me use this abstract shapes that it's giving me to get this soft, some divisions that I can sculpt into tubular masses. This is probably where I should have started. Some nice organic shapes with the noise, and then use it to flesh out this information. Just want a nice little base I can just work with. Some outlining. Okay. So this is a good starting point. I can grab this, go back. Start building form. Yeah. So it's giving me some good information. It's pretty nice. Kind of like it's really organic, feels really nice. Inspect it with its surroundings. Yeah, that looks really nice. This has a really good approach. Masking, noise, form buildup. Because this one not too busy, but if you go really close, it has some really interesting shapes. So these nice interesting shapes to start off with. All right, now it's time to prepare this sauce that's around it before merging it. So I'm going to try in this front area to make it match the reference a lot better. And for the back side, I'm going to come up with my own solution. I think I already did a lot of work on the back side. So I'm going to move to merging this and working on it as a collective. So I'm going to create a new folder. And merge the folder. It appears to be somewhat of a mistake. I think I have a layer that I should have dealt with, so let me delete that. Go back on here, go to layers, make sure I close this layer and bake all. And now I can merge this folder. So So now I have a singular piece, and I'm going to divide it a few times so I don't have any faceting. And then let me duplicate this and dynamesh the result. Let me undo that. I have to delete lower for dynameshing, so I'm going to go for an initial 784. That's too little. I'm going to open this dot so I can get a lot of geometry and dynamesh. Okay, that's good. That held enough information. And now it's time to do a whole bunch of sculpting. So I'm going to try to reduce this surface. It's a little elevated. It's a really bulby surface that I'm going to try to capture by hand. Try to blend. Looks like I need a more aggressive brush. First, I'm going to go through and get these transitions, and then looks like I need a stronger. I'm gonna shave this a little bit more. Proceed with form that better represents the sauce. So it's a little too elevated. So I'm gonna physically push it down. And get some more fluid-like forms. proceed with this bulby transition while respecting the forms I kind of started off with. Make sure it feels like fluid. Make sure I don't have like a very visible outline, because that doesn't feel realistic at all. So I have to really work on this transition to make it feel good. Blend this form really well. Sometimes I'm digging in to break up this transition line. This is a good place to dig in and create something that is a thinner film of it. I have to be very careful how I shade this area to be like a mixture of the underlying cucumber and the sauce, if this is not covered in our sauce. Feels very mechanical, so I'm going to help the transition. It was really bulby. Okay. So we got all of this to go. Aside from this approach, I'm also envisioning a different approach with using noise, just to beat this edge up, to get something that can be built on. I might use it shortly for the back side. There we go. The bulby, the swollen bulby forms are very important. It's very visible in the reference that there's a lot of that, so. This one isn't transitioning as well. Look at that. Yeah, it's a little intense. So I'm going to tone this down. A little bit of smoothing, and then if I can use Damien to add a little bit of direction to follow. Yeah, it doesn't feel fluidy at all. I should have shaved a little bit of it off. It's a little too busy. Better transitions. And do it and set in here. This It's a different feel. Make sure I do a little more of these insets. Some pretty interesting form. going to blend it some more with its surrounding. It's feeling really prominent. Be very strategic about what I paint as fluid. Yeah. I think that'll be interesting to paint, just to make it work. All right, let me continue. Spent a lot of time here. This is the back side. Really shouldn't. As I mentioned before, I'm always trying to make sure I'm not repeating patterns. It's a hard thing to do, but you want to try. Or to cycle between your favorite patterns that get the job done. It's really heavy in the back. I have to be really careful here. Really thick. Let me see the. I'm gonna move some of this stuff down so this is in the back, but I still want it to transition well. Know which places to pick to detail. Yeah, like here, I definitely want it to be closer. I'll figure the transition out shortly, but for right now, I want to make sure all this is working. I might have gotten a little bit too crazy in the back here. This is a lot. I'm going to start to dial back some of this information. It's just simply not needed. I'm going to put myself in a position where it's going to allocate a lot of geometry there just to try to capture the form that I'm forcing it to have back there. I'm going to push. Pull out some simpler ideas. This is a bit complex. down and simplify the idea. Hide this one so I can pan this properly and see what's going on. Yeah, I really went overboard with some of these ideas here. It's all the way in the back and it has a lot of information. And see if I can do some better outlining. Yeah, it works. It's helping. I have to try to replicate the way it's behaving in the front, and the outline of the sauce is clearly visible in the front. So a lot of these super smooth transitions, I do have to work them. So we can tell cucumber from sauce, and then the painting will do the transitionary work, will be responsible for the transitionary work. Some good blending of colors and roughness and all that stuff. Subsurface scattering, all the stuff needs to be blended well at the transition points, especially if these have significantly different properties for roughness and subsurface scattering. All right, let me turn on this stuff and see what it's looking like. Yeah, looks good. I'll continue this expedition of trying to outline what is sauce and what is not. I'm sure it's a very painterly outlining so that I don't end up with something that doesn't feel organic. In some areas. Yeah, that's interesting. I should increase the subdivision level of this so I can see the real detail. I seem to have. Okay, so yeah, I think that's pretty good so far. If it doesn't feel right, I'll come back and do some more work. I do think I could add some bulbiness to it though. Yeah, let me when I project it to subdivision levels, I'm going to add some, use an alpha to add some bulbiness in certain areas of the sauce, just so it feels more like this core here. It might be a drag rect that I just utilize some parts to break up the hand sculpted detail. Right, but yeah, I'm going to take a look at this for a while and see how it's working. All right, instead of relying on an alpha to get those bulbous forms that I'm seeing in the reference, I'm going to do them by hand, right? I don't want to over alpha this. So there's some bulby masses that are very visible. I'm going to push them first with the Damien standard. And then build up. Zoom in. Turn off dynamics so I can go really small with the brush. And zoom out, see what it's looking like. Make sure I'm not doing too much. Try to vary intensity too. And size. Starting to see that I'm making them almost all the same size. I guess this is why an alpha would have done a lot to at least initially give me some better randomization. Yeah, these are all starting to feel like the same size. I'll cut some of these into pieces. That feels good. Let me make sure that this is correct. Alright, one more thing I'm going to do with this thing is go back to sharpening this edge. It just doesn't feel as cleaner as it should be. I'm going to put a noise at the top here to make sure I have an interesting transition. No, I think it's fine. I think it might be pushing too much. Get some of those rosy forms in here. Yeah, that looks like that's a part I didn't actually get to touch. Okay, I'll take it. Looks pretty good. I'm gonna look at this under different materials. See if I can catch anything. I'll turn this on. Looks like I may have turned on. There we go. Turn that off. So you can see what's going on. Now a more realistic material that simulates shadow correctly. It's not overemphasizing cavities, so I can see. All right, I'm going to smooth the bottom, and then I'm going to generate the final geometry that I'll be finalizing. So I'm going to hold down shift and smooth this transition. Actually, this might be something that will be easier to smooth once I have the subdivision levels. Or I could actually just hold down shift and go to the light box, go to brush, and look for smooth. And there's a smooth strong. It's a really, really strong brush. I'm going to make sure I turn it off after I'm done using it. Turn on back face so it doesn't ruin anything behind here, and just smooth this transition. It's at the bottom. I'll fix this more. And let me get rid of that smooth strong brush. Return back to the regular one. Clean this up a bit. So I'm going to duplicate this, hide everything it's not supposed to be on. Including that. And I'm going to go solo, go to wireframe, and resurface at 1K. This is let me look at the original surface. No, this is not going to be enough. I'm going to do maybe 2.5K. This model isn't going to be for a game engine. It's intended to be used in Maya and high-end 3D applications, so I just want a better approximation. Although this form here is not as violent and aggressive, so I can get away with a lower subdivision level, but I prefer something like this. This is a little bit more defined, and if even this doesn't work, I'll take a higher subdivision level to Maya. All right, so this is going to be the final. We want to start projecting the data. So I'm going to turn this off. Turn off color, divide, project. Divide, project. Divide, project. Divide, project. I think I have enough data. I can stop here. Yeah. This will at least prevent me from taking the not so great brush strokes. So I'll stop here. I will divide it one more time and run. Actually, before I divide it, I'll run a smooth operation with deformation. So I'll run a few smooths and then divide it. Work a little bit on these transitions. Let me deal with this by just getting rid of this transition. Never really going to see this, but still don't want it to be. Just clean it up a little. Clean up this a little bit. All right, before I proceed, I'm going to add the noise that I want to this top area, and then I'm going to bring the seeds in. I'll just duplicate them from the other cucumber. Let me mask this top portion. And this bottom area too. I'm not going to worry so much about the seeds at the bottom. Blur the mask a bit, go up here, store and morph target, just in case I want to delete some of the noise. I'll go to surface noise, frame, I'll go to the small scale noise, a little stronger. That should do it. And apply to mesh. Okay, so I have some at the top and the bottom. I'm not going to spend too much time here, but I will take the morph brush, kind of take away the effect from the center a little bit, just to distinguish between the outskirts and the part I'm going to put the seeds at. Not so worried about this detail as much. It's going to rely mostly on texturing to look the way it's supposed to look. Alright, so I'm going to come over here to this seeds for the English cucumber, duplicate them, get them out of here. And there's definitely too many of them, so I'm going to delete some of them. I don't need these. Ones that I brought to the surface. So I can delete, go to lower subdivision level and delete hidden. Okay, looks like I have mesh layers. Make sure I show everything. Bake all, and then if mesh layers is on the original, I need to turn that off because that really hogs up memory when you have it recording. So I'll go bake all, return here, hide these on the surface. Go to lower subdivision level, delete hidden. For this one, I'm going to make the uppermost level show on the surface. So like that. I'll take a different approach and see which two work better. So that one I'm going to rely on. Well, both of them are still going to rely on translucency to show the rest of them, the other layer that's underneath. Let me turn on transparency here. Make sure I pull this up, and that one too. Turn up transparency. Move this. Make sure I make it as flush with the surface as possible. You slice through this thing and you look at them sliced, they're just not protruding from the surface that much. Okay, so then what I'm really counting on is that when I paint, I should be able to see this bottom layer, but it might be too far down. So I'm going to, for this one, take the bottommost layer and bring it up. I reserve the right to come back and make adjustments until I have seeds that are working with the shading. So if it's not looking good, I'll just come back here and readjust. So those ones behind there will show with the translucency that's going to be, or the transparency or transmission that's going to be painted, will allow the bottommost layer to show. All right, so I just want to try two different approaches to see which one is better. The other one, everything is inside, so we'll see. This might not connect too well being on the outermost layer, and if that is the case, I'll just push it down and let it sit underneath the surface. I just want to see how well it's going to work. All right, so it's time to work on the sauce and how it transitions, and then I'll take the sauce to completion. So let me put this in a folder called Screen Left, Screen Right, American Cucumber. American Cucumber, and this is American Cucumber Seeds. All right, let me start turning this stuff on, see what it all looks like. I have to continually inspect like this. I do want to add some bumpy detail here. I'm going to put it on a layer. 3 million. Let's see if it comes through. I don't think it'll come through at 3 million. I'm going to add one more subdivision level. So I'm at 13 million now with that. And I'll add a layer just in case I don't like it. I'll also delete morph target, store a new one. That might have been a better approach. Let me delete this layer. They're really expensive. So I will delete this layer. I have a morph target, it should be fine. Take my standard brush, take color spray, go to alpha 40 and get some bumps on the actual cucumber. Actually, I think what I should do is get some noise on it first. It looks really bland. So I'm going to mask this region. The cucumber part. I don't want the noise to go on the sauce. It'll get its own noise, or at least the noise should be different, really different from what I'm putting on the actual cucumber. I'm gonna come down here, blur the mask a little, go back up, go to surface, noise, edit. That. Looks good. Increase the strength a little. Back to mesh. Okay, that feels cool. All right, so now I'm going to do the 40 spray. Actually, let me first delete morph target, store it so that I can erase. It from the sauce. in the areas that it shouldn't be. I'm varying the size. Okay, I'm going to grab the morph brush and erase it from the sauce. I don't need it on the sauce. And I'm also going to tone it down. So it's not so invasive. Yeah, like that. Yeah, I think it's gonna work. Okay, I'm going to start working on the transitions. Not only the transitions to the cucumbers, but also to this burger. So I'm gonna start very roughly. Building up on a lower subdivision level. Something. It's really good that I have it on a lower subdivision level. I pick a different material. Using build up to just get some good form. I'm gonna go with this. It's a little bit easier to see what's happening. Okay, now I'm going to work on its transition to the meat. This cannot be all even. It does not connect to the meat that way. So I'm pushing and pulling. I'll do it to the cheese next. With the cheese, it makes a pretty nice pristine line, but with the meat, there's a lot of irregularity as it tries to glom onto the very varied surface detail of the meat. This isn't making contact, so I'm going to fix that. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing. Well, there's more issues with contact here to make sure it's flush with the burger. And the irregularity that connects, irregular shapes that create the connection are established. First at this low subdivision level. Okay, I'm going to add some large scale primary detail here. Not too much. I'm going to noise it shortly to add some secondary detail, but I just want just a little bit of a underlying form, say primary form, which can also be done with noise, but I'm going to just flesh it in. It's a little easier to do. Go to the front of this thing and make sure that this cheese here has a more irregular shape. It's not just a nice stream. Okay. So I'm going to focus on this one's transitions first, and then I'll come to the cheese. So the sauce, I'm going to divide it and apply a noise. Let me do a morph target and store one so I can get rid of it if I don't want it. Noise. And I'm looking for medium scale noise. So fairly large. That actually is not bad. Let me see what that looks like. That's surprisingly really nice. Actually, let me see what it looks like when it's applied. Yeah. Yeah, that's really nice. I think so. It's pretty cool. All right, I'm gonna divide it twice and then start using a mask. I'm going to import a mask from file from the ZBrush library. I'm going to import these three. And that one. And I'm going to use them as alphas. Solo this. To get this different type of information, noise information in certain parts. So I'm going to invert it. And I'm going to actually put this one on the layer. Go to surface noise, edit. But I want somewhat stronger and just different. That's a lot, but I have a layer and I have a morph target. So I'm going to apply to mesh. No, that's a bit too tough. So I'm going to reduce the scale and the strength. No. Strength. Continue to reduce the scale. Yeah, just to break up the noise detail. Some undesired results here. I need to work on building up my own form to fix these mistakes. Some artifact from the noise. Thankfully, it doesn't destroy the detail. Okay, now I'm going to get in there and really polish this transition work. Zoom out and see what we're getting. Yeah, that works. Yes. I'll do the same thing all around. Count on that noise to also help me. So I'm also subtracting in some instances. Okay, it makes for a more interesting transition there. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm also varying the brush size so I don't get like the same thing. These spirals really work well for gutted detail. You just have to randomize wherever possible the motion that you're using. And the tubular forms also really work. Think about all the cool ways you can combine. Tubular forms and these rosy spiraling forms. Okay, so it's not bad at all. yeah, I'm not gonna go do too much on this source. This noise is about enough. It's really supposed to be a lot smoother. Not smoother than the cheese. The cheese is really smooth. There's this thing has a lot more greediness in it. Well, noisy pattern. So I'm gonna work the transition on to the meat in the same way. Get a nice organic feel and transition. This one is fairly, it's not so much of a difficult. I'll be very careful over here because the transition between the cheese and the sauce is not as noisy, so it's a lot smoother based on the reference. So I'm going to be very careful. Careful there. In some areas, I'll leave the noise that I applied, the form that it provided, so I don't have this whole rosy build up. Basically mixing it in with what the noise gave me. It's pretty good. Okay, I'll take a look at it for a bit. And with that, I'll do the forms by hand, no noise function. Subdivide that. Get rid of this awkward transition. Yeah, I think the noise really helped break it up in an interesting way. I just feel like it needs another bit of something to really make it work. I'm going to add a layer to it just to test out something. I have an alpha that I created from alpha 40. It's in my custom alphas. I call it alpha 40 mod. I might have used it previously in one of the other lessons, but it's just these really interesting gutty shapes, and they make for some interesting, they really help to add personality sometimes. Yeah. Be careful. Sometimes apply them with a negative, applying them with a positive and a negative to get a different feel. And I also change size. I just don't like the similar noisy feel. Let me try another one. I have 3 of them. Helps break up things just a little. I do want to mention that I have changed my mind about merging the sauce and this cheese, because I want to be able to test out the asset with simulations, and it will be really nice if these two particular meshes are separate, because they're going to flow. They're liquid and they're going to flow. So it's nice to be able to apply the appropriate dynamic settings for cheese that's liquidating and for this sauce. So I'm going to leave these two separate. Their transitions are not that hard to sell. It's just have to do a really good paint job. All right, I'm going to go in there, and everything that looks spherical, I'm going to manipulate it to not be that way. I don't want perfect spheres, just sphere forms in there. It just doesn't feel correct. So this is from the custom alpha 40 brush I created, and if anything is feeling too spherical, I'll turn it into a different type of form, more elongated or just larger, connected in with a different mass right next to it. And the same will apply to these areas where I put this bulby detail. Just make sure it's not, they can't just all be the same type of bulby information. So it needs to feel organic, and it needs to tie into the surrounding masses properly. Turn on the top button, make sure I'm allocating my time to the most important places. this top bun, data might be a little too aggressive, so I might need to go to a lower subdivision level and tone it down. Yeah, it's a tough protrusion, so in the areas where it's maybe protruding a little bit too much, I'll smooth it out. Because it's like right there. I'm going to pickle and just smooth that. It's a little bit too aggressive. If you find any other ones like that, I'll deal with it. Okay, there are a list of things that I want to do to close out this lesson. And the first one is an issue I noticed with this top sauce. Now, at the parts where it's pouring onto the cheese, it's not tapering correctly. Like, it just looks like a shelf. So in order to fix that, I'm going to do it on the lower subdivision level. So I'm going to solo first. Let me turn off the top bun. Okay. And I will go to the lower subdivision level, which is really nice, low mesh. Then I'm going to take my trim dynamic tool and start shaving away. And the beauty about doing it like this is it doesn't affect any of the detail in the higher subdivision levels. It just so just make sure it's actually pouring. At the peak, it should be less. So I'm going to try to minimize that. It's really aggressive here. It's expected. The extraction was just an extraction upward. So just treated it like a platform. Okay, feels a lot better. Let me look at it at higher subdivision levels. Wow, it generated some artifacts, but this one still feels a little not so good. It's very shelfy. Okay, that feels better, but I do have to go in and fix this artifact. Not on the highest subdivision level, maybe a lower one. So put. Probably should have resurfaced this before I really went into it. That may have helped with this. think that's all of it. The high subdivision level. And it has cheapened the lip a bit, so fix it. Alright, that should get all of it. And then and just mask the lip and just put some light noise on it. Could have just reduced it with the move tool on a higher subdivision level. All right, so I'm gonna go over here with the surface, noise, edit, nothing too crazy. About like that much. It's not as much as I expected. I'm gonna increase the strength just a little bit, about like that, and yeah. That should work. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do, now that I feel like this is at least cleaned up to some good degree, is to add the secondary forms that I want to see on this cheese here. So I'm going to isolate it. It doesn't need that much detail, it just needs some voluminous information. Or voluminous is the word I should use. Just something to not make it feel like a flat piece. And for the cheese, it is cubic. It is a cuboid, so this shelf doesn't matter as much. All right. When it melts, though, it does take on a more pouring form, but yeah, that's good form. I'm gonna go around and do it on. I'm really actually gonna have to isolate it and do it on the whole thing. I'm gonna get rid of this really sharp edge. So I can go back to detailing each one with tubular forms. styrofoams also. That feels good. That's pretty good. Get some of these transition points to the meat, because meat is an even surface. It doesn't or shouldn't just drape over it so smoothly. The separation should not be as clean cut as the separation between the sauce and the cheese. So that's what some of this stuff is down there. Yeah, here it definitely doesn't make sense. Good separations there. If I haven't mentioned it, when I do all this build up, I'm definitely smoothing, because the build up brush leaves striations, and they look really nice after they're smooth. They look really nice and organic. Okay, so for now I think this is a good amount of transitions. This one feels a little weird. Well married into its mass a lot better. This mass feels weird too. Alright, so that's it. And the last thing I want to do is integrate these seeds into their surrounding meshes a lot better. So I'm also going to do that on a somewhat of a slightly, it's not so far down on subdivision levels, but low enough that I can sort of trace out. It just makes it look a lot more unified. When you have pieces that are separate like this, you really have to work hard to make them look like they're transitioning well, and something like this really helps to build up around. So it feels like it's embedded in there. And this one definitely needs a lot of it. So, because right on the surface. Trying to make it feel organic. not so brush strokey. Actually, I made a mistake and did all this on a higher subdivision level. End up with a lot of strokes, so I'm going to go down to 5. End up with a lot of strokes that are difficult to get rid of. So again, this is just for cohesion of the two meshes. It might not be even something that's very visible on reference, but just for the sake of having a more professional looking sculpt, you want that. Add some interesting gutty detail here. Alright, so I think that's going to be it for this lesson. Alright, that's a lot of work. It's 3 hours. So in the next lesson, I'll be dealing with this bottom burger and its cheese, and then I'll finalize with this bottom bun and its sauce and the fluid meshes, and then it's time to get out of ZBrush. All right, so it's about 2 more lessons of sculpting, and then it's a wrap. Let me turn on the top bun. See what it looks like so far. Yeah, almost done.